It was meant to be a simple escape from the city's noise, a calm weekend by a hidden lake deep in the countryside. The group had driven for hours through endless trees, the road narrowing until it seemed to disappear into the forest itself. When they finally arrived, the lake looked like a sheet of black glass, perfectly still, surrounded by tall pines that swayed only slightly in the evening breeze. They set up their tents, lit a campfire, and laughed at how isolated they were, joking about ghosts and monsters that might be watching them. The air was cool, the sunset painted the sky orange and purple, and the scent of pine mixed with smoke felt strangely comforting. But even then, something about the silence seemed too heavy, too complete, as if the woods were holding their breath. When night came fully, the stars shimmered above like cold eyes staring down, and the lake below reflected them perfectly. Until it didn't. As the fire cracked and dimmed, one of them noticed the surface of the lake begin to ripple. It was subtle at first, just small circles spreading across the water, as if something large was moving beneath. There was no wind, no fish jumping, no reason for the water to stir at all. Then came a faint sound, a whisper, light as air, drifting across the water. At first, they thought it was just the wind carrying their own voices back to them, but it wasn't. The whispers were saying names, soft and slow, spoken in a voice none of them recognized. The sound seemed to come from everywhere, yet nowhere, echoing over the surface like a memory trying to escape. The laughter faded, and silence returned except for the crackle of the fire and the slow movement of the water. Someone suggested it was a prank, maybe campers across the lake, but when they looked, the far side was covered in fog, dark and empty. Unease began to settle in. One by one, they stood, shining flashlights across the lake. The beams cut through the mist, reflecting off the water's surface, but nothing moved. The whispers stopped the moment they tried to listen, like whatever it was didn't want to be caught. Trying to shake it off, they sat back down, trying to bring the conversation back to normal. But the mood had changed. Every sound, the rustle of branches, the crack of a twig, felt sharper, closer, more deliberate. The temperature seemed to drop, and the smoke from the fire drifted toward the lake, as if drawn by something unseen. When they finally decided to turn in for the night, the woods were so silent it felt unnatural, like even the insects refused to make a sound. Inside their tents, the only thing they could hear was the faint lapping of water against the shore. And something else, something faintly rhythmic, like footsteps in the shallows. Around midnight, one of them woke up. He couldn't explain what stirred him. Maybe a dream, maybe the feeling of being watched. The fire outside had died, and the world was cast in pale silver from the moon. He listened closely. There it was again, the soft splash of water, slow and uneven, like someone walking along the edge of the lake. He unzipped his tent, careful not to make noise, and peeked outside. The shoreline glimmered faintly under the moonlight, calm and quiet. But then he saw it. Prints in the sand. Wet, barefoot prints, leading away from the water and toward the camp. His heart froze as he followed them with his eyes. They led straight to one of the other tents. The footprints stopped right outside it, and didn't turn back. He whispered his friend's name, but there was no answer. The tent was still, too still, as though whoever was inside was holding their breath. The air grew colder, the smell of damp earth stronger. Then came the sound of dripping, slow and steady, like water falling from soaked clothing. He turned his flashlight on, hands shaking, and pointed it at the prints. They glistened wetly in the beam, still fresh. But when he looked toward the lake, the surface was completely calm again. Not a single ripple. He woke the others, his voice trembling. But when they came out to see, the prints were gone, erased, as if they had melted back into the soil. They tried to laugh it off, claiming he'd been dreaming, but none of them went back to sleep easily that night. The next morning, fog clung to the water like smoke, thick and unmoving. The air smelled metallic, faintly of rust. When they walked to the edge to wash up, one of them noticed something strange. On the far side of the lake, half submerged in the water, stood what looked like an old dock. But when they arrived the day before, that dock wasn't there. It looked ancient, splintered, barely standing. Yet there was movement near it, something dark bobbing on the surface. Curiosity pulled them closer. But the moment they stepped into the water, a deep vibration ran through the ground, like something stirring beneath. The ripples spread outward again, circling them, and the whispers returned, louder this time, still speaking names, slow and deliberate, as if calling them home. They stumbled back, hearts pounding, and hurriedly packed their things. But as they turned toward the path leading out of the woods, one of them froze. The trail they'd come from, gone. In its place stood more trees, dense and unfamiliar, as though the forest had shifted overnight. Panic set in. They split up briefly, trying to find the right direction, but every turn led them back to the same view. The lake, dark and still, waiting. It was as if they were trapped inside its reflection, walking in circles around something ancient and unseen. The whispers followed them now even in daylight, low voices brushing past their ears, sometimes calling from the trees, sometimes from beneath their feet. By afternoon, exhaustion forced them to rest. They sat near the water's edge again, though none wanted to admit how terrified they were. The fog began to rise once more, swallowing the far shore until only the faint outline of the trees remained. Then they saw movement in the mist. Figures, faint and colorless, standing knee-deep in the water. Too far to see clearly, yet close enough to feel. The figures didn't move at first, only watched. Then, slowly, they raised their arms and pointed toward the group. The whispers turned into faint cries, the same names again, over and over, until one of the campers screamed and ran for the woods. The others followed, branches tearing at their clothes, lungs burning as they ran through endless trees that all looked the same. They never found the path out that day. When night came, the temperature dropped again, and they had no choice but to camp near the lake once more. The fire barely stayed lit as fog crept in close, swallowing the ground, thick as breath. Somewhere out on the water, something moved again. Slow, steady ripples approaching the shore. They sat in silence, listening to it come closer, hearing their names whispered once more, now from right behind them. When they turned, no one was there, only footprints leading back toward the lake. In the morning, the campsite was empty. The water was calm, and when the ranger passed by a week later, he found 3 sets of tents, zipped shut, with no one inside. The only sign of life was a single flashlight, lying near the shore, still on, its beam pointing into the black water.